In section 1.5, we're just going to talk a little bit about the idea of function families. So far in this course, hopefully the big takeaway is that algebra is a lot more than just x's and y's. It's a lot more than just formulas. We can approach algebra numerically, graphically, and analytically. Often it's to our advantage if we actually work with multiple representations. We saw through the use of Desmos that when we have an equation, we can use it to produce a graph, and then we can see how well that graph fits with a table of values. And so we can use all three of them to really analyze a function and see how useful it is. Right? Oftentimes, and most importantly, we can use algebra then to make predictions about things, real-world things. And the math can be extremely powerful, but we always have to be aware that it also has its limitations. Model breakdown can and does occur, and we want to be careful of that as well. As we now move through the remainder of the course, we're going to organize our study of algebra into the study of algebra for several different function families. Function families are groups of functions that have similar characteristics. So if I have a function family, all of the functions in that family will have similar equations, similar graphs, and really even similarities in their tables of values, which we'll try to point out some of those are a little more obvious than others. I really encourage you as an algebra student to pay attention to the function families because they really help you organize your thinking. Oftentimes algebra students will say things like, it just seems like there's so much to remember and I have too many things to try to keep track of. Oftentimes that's because they're trying to approach every single problem almost like a new problem, rather than organizing their thinking around these function families. There are two essentially classes of functions. In the first half of our course, we'll be looking at what are called polynomial functions. These include linear functions with x to the first in them, quadratic functions that contain an x squared, and then what are called higher order polynomials that might have like an x cubed or an x to the fourth and so on. So those are our units 2, 3, and 4, what we'll essentially be covering before the midterm. In the second half of the class, we'll be talking about non-polynomial functions. Exponential functions, where the variable's in the exponent. Logarithmic functions, and if you haven't seen those before, we'll get used to them this semester. Rational functions, which are algebraic fractions. And radical functions like square roots and cube roots and things like that. So we essentially have those function families that we're going to organize all of our thinking about. Every time we look at a function family, we'll look at its representation numerically, graphically, and analytically. And we'll always be sure to look at real-world applications, just like we've already started doing, but for each set of function families. My last little piece of advice here, watch for techniques that are going to recur over and over in this class. We'll definitely be pointing them out as we go through them, but one thing that makes an algebra student a successful algebra student is they really recognize and make use of those patterns that tend to recur. Ready to launch our first function family in Unit 2 in the next video.